Fish are friends, not food.
I'm a little worried about Rob.
Yes, it's happening.
Ever since we tried to summon Cthulhu, he hasn't been the same.
I'm growing gills. Gills. My transformation into a deep one has finally begun.
Rob, we don't see any gills.
It's these kids getting involved all the stuff causes them to go crazy.
I think I feel the webbing starting to grow between my fingers.
Welcome to Dinner and a Board Game, a new actual play show about friends, good food, and lots of fun at the gaming table. We're your hosts, Megan and Heath. Each night, I'll invite the gaming group over to my house to cook dinner, sample drinks, and play a board game on one of our customized board game boards. Dinner and a Board Game is an actual play show where you'll be able to watch the game from start to finish with gameplay dashboards and graphics that help track the turns and allow everyone to follow the game's action. We'll play games like Zombicide, Black Plague, Descent, Journeys in the Dark, Small World, Unearth, and Terraforming Mars. We'll even be joined by special guests such as Lou Anders, J.F. Lewis, and cosmic horror artist David LaRocca. The show is free to watch on YouTube. Just come by my channel, Heath Robinson, and be sure to subscribe. Click Watch Now to start the first episode and join us for fun-filled evenings of dinner and a board game. And now it's time for General Geekdom, the roundtable show about movies, games, books, and other things going on in the fantasy and sci-fi genres, as well as all the geekverse. Hello, everyone. Got us all in here. Welcome to episode 10. This is the 10th episode of General Geekdom since I decided, hey, maybe I should be trying out this live streaming stuff. And I think we've had very productive 10 episodes, talked about a lot of things, and I think advanced discussions on a lot of different topics. We've gained 428 subscribers in the last 28 days overall, of course, across the entire channel. And I appreciate everyone who has watched and been a part of this. I think we probably should go another round. I think that another round of General Geekdom conversations would be in order. We've got other topics. If you have topics that you think would make good ones, please let us know, because I'm going to try to pull those together and schedule them. Tonight's discussion is entitled The Art House Symbolism, Storytelling in Non-Standard Structures. So that's what we're going to be talking about. We've got the panel here. I'm going to let everybody go around and introduce themselves, starting with Drake.
I'm Drake. I'm an award-winning novelist. I was the lead fiction writer for Master Game from Sony. I've written in pretty much every medium that exists. I teach writing all over the world. That's me. You can find out everything about me at starringwriterstudio.com. I guess I should plug that.
All right. And yes, I first got connected with Drake because I saw a fantastic lecture he gave at Gen Con on storytelling. If you ever get a chance to see that, definitely see it. All right, Megan.
Hello, I'm Megan Peko. I am a costumer and actor. I've worked on The Cultists as costumer and police officer, and also do Dinner and Board Game with Heath. And I am going to be Libby, and I ought to be in pictures at a theater in town coming up, which I'm excited about.
All right. Dax?
Hey, I'm Dax. I'm Rob from The Cultists, and I'm also featured on the Dinner with a Board Game, at least the new season. And I do a lot of production assistant work when I can in film. So.
All right. Brennan?
Hi, I'm Brennan. I am a freelance, and am I getting feedback? I can't tell. Oh, it's just through Megan's speaker. Never mind. I'm a freelance, filmmaker. I do commercials. I've got a 9-to-5 making commercials for Spectrum, and I put my own stuff out here and there. Stay tuned for more. I guess you can find me on Instagram or my website, which should be linked somewhere.
Oh, yes. Everybody's links will be down below. All right, so we are talking about the art house symbolism and storytelling in non-standard structures, and we kind of had the ideas here in our subnotes or subtopics about pretentiousness, I suppose, like mass market stuff versus stuff that's intentionally more artistic, when do we get into pretentiousness and things like that. Actually, Dax was the one who recommended this topic. So I'm going to turn it over to Dax to kind of get us started and the conversation about the conversation and what it is we're going to be talking about. So, Dax?
Thank you, Heath. Thank you very much. So I want to start by saying, I wanted to start with the topic of what makes a movie pretentious. It seems to be the case that one man's trash is another man's treasure in this case. The movie that moves your heart in all the right ways, one person's going to say that this movie is brilliant and another person's going to say, oh, that was really pretentious. So to try and have some sort of objectivity to the topic, I decided to revisit some movies that rubbed me the wrong way over the week and just kind of try to come to a formula of why these movies didn't work for me. That doesn't mean that they're not going to work for you, but they didn't work for me. And so first I figured I'd look at the definition of pretentious. There's a lot of ways you can word it, but the way that rings true for me is expressing an exaggerated importance on oneself, especially when it isn't earned. Movies can cover a lot of big topics, and when it's done well, it's brilliant. But if there's something about it that doesn't feel earned, then there's going to be a problem. And I saw here that pretentiousness can be done a couple different ways. On one end of the spectrum, you could have a movie with no subtlety, and it just beats you over the head with what it's about. Now, this may be controversial to some of you. I didn't like the movie Interstellar with Christopher Nolan. And so the thing about that movie is it's like just beating you in the head about love. Love transcends time and space and the universe. I'm like, okay, stop. Stop.
I agree with that one.
Yeah. And then on the opposite end. Go ahead, Brennan. Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just saying I agree. That was a good one.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have artistic ambiguity that leaves you little to nothing to go off of. Like I hate when I watch a movie, and this is really something the art house films are guilty of. It can be done with some mainstream stuff, but really in the art house genre, you see so many movies where I leave the theater going, what was that about? Like, what was that even about? And then you get your like artsy fartsy film buffs talking about it, and they think they know the whole movie. They think that, and it just feels like this game, really, this like elitist game of, if I can come up with like a post hoc rationalization for what the movie was about, and I can say it with confidence, then that means I know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you have an example of that one? What's our movie with too much artistic ambiguity, as an example?
I'm very curious about this.
So these were, to be honest, I was visiting over the week the more mainstream examples of pretentiousness, but this would be any type of art house movie you've seen where you just couldn't figure out what this movie was even about. I mean, this is typically stuff I see from film festivals. So the reason I can't name one off the top of my head is because it's usually a film made by some indie filmmaker, and I've already forgotten what the movie was called by the time yeah. You guys know what I'm talking about? Have you been through that?
Yeah. I think I know exactly I think that was at the Sidewalk Fest that we were at, right? I think I know what movie you're talking about.
No, I didn't have well, we watched like 5 movies. Which one were you talking about?
Do you want to say?
No, I don't.
Okay, but I swear I didn't have like a specific movie in mind when I said that. It was like just sort of my amalgamation of thoughts of indie films I had been through.
Okay.
Yeah, but another thing I want to touch on is like, you can have a movie with no meaning and no purpose, right? Like, let's say like Michael Bay's Transformers, or Godzilla versus King Kong. Like, these are fun popcorn films. I'm not dissing these movies whatsoever, and they're not pretentious. But I think it would logically, I think it just is intuitive for me that if you can have a movie with no meaning and no purpose. You can have a movie with too much meaning and too much purpose. And that kind of, I can see how that would throw people off for a second and say, wait, what? Like, we love movies with meaning. We love movies that have a purpose. How can you have too much of a good thing? And in my opinion, I think what I've seen is I've seen movies where the meaning of the movie is being carried not by the characters, but by like things in the setting, things in the shots, how they shoot the film. It's good for, the cinematography to like complement your movie. It should complement the story and the plot that you have. But I've seen movies before where it's like every single scene is like an art piece. It's like a painting. And I think for paintings, it's okay for every single object in the painting to have symbolic significance. But if I can know like the plot of your movie by just, or if I can know the message of your movie by just taking the characters out of it and just looking at the background, the sets, the soundtrack, I feel like you went overboard.
You must really hate Kubrick.
Actually, it's amazing you named Kubrick because this is another thing I wanted to get into is that like the mainstream directors like Kubrick, they are always ascribed, like people write video essays for hours on how brilliant he is, and he is brilliant. But so much of his brilliance is like left to the interpretation of the people watching it. Because I've heard Kubrick in an interview talk about his own movies and say like, these are his words. He said like, whenever somebody says my movie is about the human condition, they're usually full of shit. So Kubrick, what Kubrick was getting at was that he doesn't start movies with subtext. And I've heard this from other directors too. I was listening to a Quentin Tarantino interview, and he said in his writing process, he never starts with subtext. He starts with the story. He may start with writing one scene about somebody in danger, and he realizes later on that he can use this scene as an opportunity to convey an idea, to convey a meaning. But he doesn't start writing the movie with a particular meaning or message in mind.
Yeah. I don't know if any of Tarantino's movies do have a message, really. But I mean, I've been struggling all week to come up with something that I actually find pretentious. It's been really hard because, like, I don't think just having a lot of artistic ambiguity makes something pretentious. Like, for example, I know we're talking about movies right now, but I mean, this applies to books and everything.
You can talk about books and all that too, yeah.
Yeah. But since I'm primarily a movie guy, this is where my head goes. But like the guy who directed the movie Drive, Nicholas Winding Refn, at least all the ones I've seen, all his other movies are very, very artistically ambiguous, and I don't understand them. I don't know if there is any meaning or purpose behind them, but I wouldn't go as far as to say they're pretentious just because they're art house and they don't have any like direct meaning or direct story, because sometimes the intent can just be to play with form, like the form of the medium, which is fine. But I completely agree with you. I think the Interstellar example that you said is kind of the perfect example of pretentiousness, because when I was looking at the definition, the primary thing it seemed like was that it was unearned. And you know, in Interstellar, they're talking about love is the driving force of whatever, and love can transcend space and time, and it's like love is quantifiable. They say that.
Yeah, for a movie that Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's the whole movie up to that point has been about, you know, what is the future of mankind? Is it on Earth? Is it to leave Earth? Like, how do we move forward? Like, once the Earth is kind of decayed enough for us to not be able to live there. And like, so the message just kind of comes out of nowhere. And like, it doesn't have anything really to do with the story. And it's like, I think that's probably the perfect example of something being pretentious, because it's like, it's just completely unrelated to anything that the characters have been doing. But it's almost interesting, because I feel like if they had placed a conversation like that towards the end of the movie, once the characters have been through everything they've been through, it might not have been pretentious.
Yeah,
but just because of
I think it's
how
also
it's
a
set up,
factor.
it's iffy.
My only thought on it, and me and Brennan talked about this a little bit, was I wondered how much movies can be pretentious compared to like other works of art, books and stuff, and simply because those you can self do, whereas movies, it takes a lot more time and effort and going through a lot more people in order for it to get to the point where people can view it. So that's just my little
which always amazes
Right
me
there.
how some of these things get made, because knowing the industry, knowing what it takes, knowing all the backside of everything. Excuse me. So when you were talking about a movie that looks pretty but literally delivers nothing, the movie that came to my mind was Valerian and the City of a Thousand Disappointments. I mean cities. Like that movie was just pretty.
I don't know that one.
Was that the CGI? Did that have the girl with the really intense eyebrows and the skinny dude? I forget their names.
It was live action. It was based off a graphic novel. Spent a ton of money on it. Came out, I think, in late teens, somewhere around in there.
Okay. Yeah, but it's like sci-fi, and they're like hopping between worlds or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't know. Would that be pretentious, or would that just be like a waste of money? I don't know.
Well,
I didn't watch the movie all the way through.
I think that and the last Blade Runner movie would be what I would consider, where like the last Blade Runner movie, he was like, oh no, I don't care about a story. I just want every scene to look amazing. And I'm like, that's not why I'm here. I'm not here to watch your amazing scenes. I'm actually here to be entertained with a story.
Brennan, the last time Blade Runner was mentioned on this podcast, I was asking you which version I should watch. And I took your advice. I saw the final cut. I finally watched Blade Runner. Yeah. And I totally see how it's inspired the future of sci-fi after it.
Yeah.
And I think there's tons of good things in the film, but I can see why people would say that movie was pretentious, particularly Ridley Scott's edit of it.
Yes. Well, you should see the studio edit of it too. You need to go back and
I will say that. Hey, let's bring up the theatrical cut, because I learned about that too. I learned about how the studio wanted to dumb it down for everybody, and so they just had Harrison Ford like narrating his thoughts. And that was way overboard in the opposite direction. That was like, I hate when the studios, in order to avoid confusion, they go overboard in the opposite direction, and they like describe the thoughts of the character.
Through the whole film.
Through the whole film. That's just disgusting.
It's pretty bad.
But Blade Runner 2049, I still can't decide how I feel about that movie. I think it's a movie where it's really not even fair for me to give an opinion until I watch it a second time.
I was very conflicted as well and felt like that too, because I had like a million different thoughts going through my brain, and Brennan remembers this. And I was literally like, I need some time to like think about it and come back to it and maybe see it a second time to have an opinion.
The only thought I had was, it's only 2 hours. Don't commit suicide. It's only 2 hours. Don't commit suicide.
That's brutal. Well, I tell you, that director, though, I think, look out for that guy. I can't pronounce his name, but he made Arrival, and I really liked Arrival.
And
Arrival was incredible.
He made Dune, he made Prisoners, he made Arrival, he made Blade Runner 2049.
He made Prisoners, that's right. I love Prisoners.
Yeah, Prisoners is probably, it might be my favorite movie of all time. It's just ridiculously good. But it's funny everyone says that, because I have I feel the exact opposite about the Blade Runners. Like, I think the first one is really like boring and like kind of just,
it is boring. Okay.
Drifting. It's just, I mean, it just like we're craning down and we see the bicycles go by for 90 seconds and they're walking in the rain and there's neon everywhere. It's like, okay, come on. And I felt that way about the sequel too. I wanted things to kind of hurry up a little bit, but I don't know.
So I'm the old man of the group. And when I had my boys, when they started getting into that preteen, teenage years, movies that really impacted me when I was their age, I wanted to experience those with him. And I remember the very first one that I wanted to do, and this may make me a bad parent because I think they were like 12 or 13 or so, but I think I was even younger when I watched it. But I really wanted to watch Escape from New York with them because I just remembered how amazing it was. And ever since then, every pretty much 80s action movie, that's in that genre has kind of fallen in the same place where it's just they're incredibly slow. And I didn't remember them being that slow. Like I could have, if you cut out all the just fluff that's in Escape from New York, it's probably 20 minutes long. And so Blade Runner was kind of the same way. I think that was kind of a thing in the 80s that since I was, younger, I'll just say, I didn't notice it back then. And now, because movies are so much faster, stories are so much faster, it really hit me when I went back and started watching some of those movies with my boys and just going, wow, you needed a better editor.
Yeah. And I think Blade Runner, like the original and also the sequel, kind of ride the edge of pretentiousness for me, because it's like we were talking earlier about how it's pretentious if they try and push a message that isn't related to the story. But I feel like for Blade Runner, it's a weird case where the message is the story.
Yeah.
And like the characters aren't really, I mean, they're doing stuff because of who they are for sure, but it's like I don't quite know how to explain it. It just feels like the first Blade Runner movie, the whole question is, are replicants humans? Like, what is human? And
yeah, what is human is really what they were trying to explore.
Yeah, and the second Blade Runner movie tries to do the same, like ask the same question, but with a few more details in place. Like, well, what about this? And what about this? And I don't know. Putting a whole character whose storyline is centered around that. It's like it's such an abstract mission that I can't really relate to them. And it makes them feel a little bit less like characters somehow because they are so unrelatable that it just feels like the only reason the movie exists is for the art direction and the message. And it does bother me in both of them, but I do like Blade Runner 2049 better because it does feel like it has more of a traditional character arc.
I will say, like, given the choice between which one to watch again, I want to watch 2049 because I won't be bored when I watch it. And I think any problems that I have with the movie currently could potentially be re-rationalized upon another viewing.
Yeah.
We've talked about this idea of message. The message has come up a couple of times here, and I was kind of wondering how we're talking about message, and especially how that contrasts with the theme. Because you say, okay, I'm starting this out, and I don't actually have a message that I'm intending to deliver when I start writing the story or starting to develop it. And then we also talked about something about production design that Dax was talking about, and The Shape of Water to me is an example of extremely. Like everything is production designed, everything to the nth degree. I mean, everything on the screen every time is pointing toward, engineered for effect. So that's like to the extreme degree. So, especially even a theater production, you have the theme and everything on the set is supposed to drive toward that. So how do we distinguish between saying, okay, I started this, now I want to explore a theme, but like we were talking about with these different directors, didn't necessarily start off with a message? What's the difference between the message and the theme?
I guess that's what I would need you to define, because the message is the theme to me, and the theme is the message. So
yeah,
I don't see those as two different things.
Well, I guess if you asked me to come up with two different things, I would have said, actually drawing from some of your work there. Drake, that the theme might be, can good defeat evil? In our most basic sense. But then I guess the message would be the answer to that. That by the time
No.
you get to the end,
You're
not
going to
necessarily.
well, yeah. I mean, but you're just answering the theme. If you don't answer the theme, you don't have a story. You just have this thing that you just went through and you don't know. And that would be my definition of pretentious. Because I've seen movies like that, and I've even read some books like that where the creator was like, "Oh no, I wanted you to make your own decision," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's not why people go to stories for the most part."
No, I will clarify on that. Like, I'm okay with open-ended movies as long as, like, I don't know. I don't really know what I'm looking for. It's like sometimes an open-ended ending works for me.
It's like the government's definition of pornography. They know it when they see it.
Yeah. So Inception. Inception has the ending with the spinning top. Is it a dream? Is it real? I was okay with that. I really was.
Well,
yeah.
You're missing what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about the ending of the movie and you deciding what happened to those characters in the world, because all of that is worthless. I'm talking about the theme, the message. You have to answer the theme at the end of the movie, and they do in Inception. You don't know whether.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Whether a dream or it was real, but the human message that they were exploring through that, you get an answer to it. Just like in most things. I've seen a couple movies where they were like, "Oh no, I'm going to pose this question to the audience," which is what the theme is. It's a question. So just using the good versus evil just to stay, consistent with that. Which is going to win? Which is better, good or evil? And so you're going to always answer that. It's just, because you have plenty of movies that end and you don't know exactly which one was reality and which one was fake. But that's what I call the physical layer. That's the characters in the world, and that has nothing to do with the message that the theme is what I would call it. I don't usually use the word message.
Yeah. Like the theme of a movie could be a question like, what does it mean to be human? That's typically the subject for a lot of like AI type movies. But if you don't answer that with some sort of answer by the end of the movie, then there was really no point in watching the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
So my example on that is Phenomenon and Michael, both being the same actor. Both those movies don't do you literally you go through this thing and you end up exactly where you started with nothing changed, like nothing, and no one learned anything. So they just blow my mind that you would actually make those movies.
Well, I think there's with every rule there's an exception. And we talked about the Coen brothers a little bit last time, but have any of you seen oh gosh, what's the name with Oscar Isaac? You know what I'm talking about? He's like a folk singer.
Llewyn Davis.
Brother Where Art
Davis. Yeah, inside Llewyn Davis. The whole point of the movie is that Oscar doesn't change. Like, he goes through all this stuff, and like by the end of the 80 minutes of the movie, he's the same person, and like nothing changed in the story, but because it didn't change in the story, I think it is an interesting case of answering the theme through inaction, because it's like it's just demonstrating that he's not willing to change himself, and because he's not willing to change himself, nothing is going to change for him.
I didn't like that one though, personally.
I know, but I didn't either the first time I watched it. But the second time you watch it and you kind of know what it's saying, it's just like,
I didn't feel like it went anywhere.
Well, exactly, because it literally goes in a circle. Like, he doesn't change, but the theme through his circular journey does develop and get answered at the end,
right?
Which is interesting.
And that's why when I'm teaching this, I always divide it into two layers: the physical layer, which is the stuff that you see, the characters, the world, the whatever they're trying to defeat or whatever, and then the invisible layer, which is the human message that you're trying to force the reader or viewer to contemplate and come away with, and your opinion of what the answer to that should be. And so I haven't seen that movie that you're talking about, but that was the thing. So like in Phenomenon, nothing is answered on either layer. Like, you get this guy who gets intelligence on everything. He knows everything that there is to know in the entire universe, and then he dies. Like, and no one has improved. You didn't contemplate anything. You didn't go, oh, the human message that I'm struggling with through this movie is I should determine whether I should be this or that, or whether this is right or that's right, or nothing happens. Like, it's just, no one's even impacted. Not even the characters are impacted. So
yeah.
So if you can have a character that goes through and doesn't grow, and that's fine. But again, that's the physical layer. That's the characters and the stuff that everyone sees. The message is that, or to me, the message is that underlying invisible element that you're forcing the reader to contemplate without them really knowing that you're doing it.
Well, let me work on that idea of the contemplation and see if I can articulate my idea a little bit better here with the distinction. Because let's say that you have the idea, okay, what does it mean to be human? That's a question that you could wrestle with throughout the story. But let's say that what you think is that what it means to be human is to love. And so instead of posing this as a question and saying, what does it mean to be human? And then we're going to be wrestling with all kinds of ideas during the story, and we're going back and forth and whatever. And then ultimately we're going to come to the conclusion that to be human is to love. That seems different and a better form of storytelling than to approach it from the perspective that this movie is going to tell you that what it is to be human is to love. And then everything in the story is telling you that. So there aren't any reversals. There aren't any, the contemplative part of it isn't there. If that's just the message that what it is to be human is to love, and that comes at you, in every scene, there's no contemplation, there's no back and forth.
Yeah, and that's what you're describing would be god awful writing, because
Right.
You're right. First of all, it'd be unearned. You'd be preaching. That's why I call it the invisible layer. In the scenario you're describing, that theme would not be invisible. You would literally just be up on the pulpit as a preacher preaching to your audience. And going back to the beginning of this, that's the definition of pretentious.
And isn't it also, it could be argued it's the definition of propaganda, because if you just start with a message you want to scream from the pulpit at everybody, and then you write a story around that, that's propaganda.
Well, that's why I always say, and that's where I'm so distraught with movies and TV shows and even some books, over these last 4 or 5 years. I keep saying every story has a message. It's called its theme. But you can't make a story out of a message. You can't do it. It's impossible. I mean, you can. They've been doing it for 5 years. They're just all
It
crap.
won't be that good.
They're just all crap.
So my question is here, since this is all on the forefront of our minds, do we think Rings of Power is pretentious?
I'm not watching it.
I'm not watching it. I just wonder, because like my feeling on that for myself is yes, because they're taking already established like a large amount of stuff and then going off on their own and expecting everybody to follow because they're Amazon.
I don't know if it's pretentious, but it's definitely just flat out like rude.
Well, because they think it's going to succeed and they've put a lot of money into it. I just feel like they're over, I don't know.
See, I don't know how much I'm not going to watch a single second of it. They broke my heart with Wheel of Time. I will never forgive them for that. And I already knew that it was going to be, I was just going to be upset by it, but I don't know if it's Amazon's fault. I'm not sure Amazon as a studio gets involved in these projects. And I don't know this for a fact. This is just me contemplating stuff, because you take a look at other stuff like Reacher or the new one with Chris Pratt in it. I think both of those are on Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. Amazon to me feels like, because they're so all over the board, it more feels like Amazon goes, oh, there's a huge fan base for this. This guy has approached me. This girl has approached me to do it. I'll just do it. I got the money. I'm just going to buy the IP and let them go do it. That's what it feels like to me. It feels more like, some people were like, oh, we really want to make Lord of the Rings in our image, not in anybody else's image. Will you give us the money because we can do it? And Amazon was like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. I don't know. Again, I don't know that for a fact, but because they have such different dichotomies in movies that are absolutely juxtaposition, or TV shows that are actually juxtaposition, as far as pushing a message in one side and propaganda in one side and just telling good stories in the other. I can't believe that the studio, because look at Disney. Disney's gone all out. Like, it's all message. It's all propaganda, everything. And that's why I've canceled my Disney Plus, because I'm like, when you guys get your act together and you actually produce something that I want to see, I'll pay you money. Until then, I'm out. I mean, you've browbeat me so bad that I just don't want to give you $20 a month anymore. Because I'm not watching any of it. I watch 15 minutes of a show and then I never watch it again. I don't want to do that. I'm not paying for that. So we know that what Disney feels about it as an entire entity. I don't think that it's that case on Amazon. It's sort of the same thing that happened internally in Netflix, because the people up above were more like, yeah, whatever you guys are going to do. It was the lower echelon that actually had their hands on all the projects that were pushing it down the agenda path. And then Netflix uppers were like, we're losing money. Screw you guys. You're done. Like, no more of this crap. We now need to get involved because you're costing us money. And so that's why they sent out that, I don't know if you guys saw the email that they sent out internally that basically said, if you have a problem with anything that we're going to produce, you probably shouldn't work here, because we're not going to do any of this stuff anymore. It was a beautiful email. But so they've adjusted course. And I was just talking to a movie producer yesterday about this. We're pitching a couple things to a couple different companies. And this was kind of the topic we were talking about, because what I'm pushing is something probably is not going to get picked up by Hollywood at this time. And so I'm looking at some alternate sources, because I'm a writer. I don't care I'm a political view. I don't give a crap about politics. I want to tell good stories. And so, he was like, well, if we do this, if we approach these people and they actually produce it, you may not, it may hurt your chances in the future with other stuff. I'm like, no, because this other stuff is going to last 2, 3, 4 more years. And then they're going to lose so much. I mean, they just canceled a movie they spent $90 million on. They
talking about Batgirl?
Yeah. Release it. Like
with the HBO thing.
I mean, you can't keep going to people and saying, hey, I want a couple $1 million from you and 10 of your closest friends so that we can make this, $100 million budget movie. And oh, by the way, it's going to lose all of your money. All of it's gone. So you're just going to use it as a tax write-off. You hit somebody wealthy like that, because that's the money comes from wealth, is where all of Hollywood's money comes from. And sure, the first time, because they know when they're getting in to invest in movies, they know that you're going to lose money on some of them. It's just the way it is. But if all of them lose money, you're not, because on some, you're like, okay, it's a tax write-off. But on all, it's like, yeah, no, I'm not. Why would I
business anymore?
It's a dumb business decision. And so that's what I told him. I was like, no, it's not. The industry is going to collapse under the fact that it's losing money. And at the end of the day, and I know artists don't want to hear this crap, and it breaks my heart to say it, but at the end of the day, stories have nothing to do with characters or plot or good writing or any of that stuff. They have to do with money. If you need a perfect proof of that, 50 Shades of Grey. It has nothing to do with quality. It has to do with, are you going to make money? And so, like with Amazon, I kind of see them going, oh, it's the number one selling fantasy of all time. Same thing with Wheel of Time. 30, 40, 90 mil, whatever it was. It's an insane number of copies sold. They're like, yeah, throw money at it. And then they just didn't really pay attention to it at that point. And again, I don't know that that's the case. I have no idea. This is just me guessing, because the studio is so scattered across the spectrum.
Well, that's what I said, that at the end of the day, money talks. At the end of the day, money is what's going to be what makes great change happen. And there's a lot more of it out there to cover mistakes, I think, than people generally think, because, but on the other hand, once you hit great financial disaster, that will change things. What about pretentiousness inside, like, the Rings of Power? Because when you had given the definition of pretentiousness to Axe, we were talking about exaggerated importance when it's not earned. I did think about that in the context of it, like a scene internal to a story as well. Yeah. And I think this comes back to also bad writing. It's probably something else I'm touching. So it's not necessarily pretentiousness. It's somebody thinking they've done a good job. They've got the scene. They want to have it a certain amount of gravitas. It could be very important, very weighty, whatever it is. But then rather than actually earning that through story, well, we'll do that through some set design, lighting, and dramatic music. And now we think we have this great weight when actually we don't.
You see that in theater too.
Yeah, and I want to clarify something about that. And actually, if anybody disagrees with me on this, I want feedback, because I don't want to just be stuck in my ways here. You know,
You're
I
wrong.
have a lot of room to grow.
Feedback.
But yeah, what on that, when I was talking about the sets and how with some movies you can tell what a movie is about just from looking at the sets. You can take the characters completely off the screen. You know, I don't think there's anything bad with creative cinematography. Like that's a part of filmmaking. But I just think there's been examples. I think there's been movies where the characters are not really carrying the theme of the movie. The characters feel kind of weak, but then everything around them just feels really strong. Like the message is really there all around them, but the characters feel kind of weak. Do you think, have you ever seen anything like that, you think?
Every Nicholas Winding Refn film. Every single one.
What? I'm not familiar with that name. What did they do?
He did Drive. He did The Neon Demon. He did.
Okay.
God, what's the one where they're in Bangkok and it's got Ryan Gosling and his hands get chopped off?
Okay.
That's basically his whole shtick. Is like beautiful, beautiful sets, beautiful cinematography. Actors all move very, very slowly. There's not very much dialogue, but the message does come through from their actions. Like when there is action, it's always focused on that message, and it's typically an abstract message. It's not directly tied. I mean, it is directly tied to what the character wants, but in a the character's motivations themselves are kind of like abstracted in a very metaphorical way, and it's like I don't know if I'd necessarily call his movies pretentious, but when you describe a movie like that, that's who I think of. But I don't know if I could call him pretentious, because I don't think he's like, I don't see an excess of self-importance.
So just that's where he decides to put it.
That's just where he likes to. That's just how he likes to tell a story, and like that's just him playing with form. And I don't think playing with form is pretentious, because it's not like he's sitting up being like, you know, this is my message and this is this and this and this. It's like there is actually stuff happening in a story, and it may, you know, not be a very traditional telling of a story, and it may not be to everyone's taste, but I wouldn't call it pretentious.
See, to me, pretentious, that's why I went to Valerian. Pretentious to me is when you, and I'm assuming the Rings of Power is that, I absolutely know the Wheel of Time show was this. It was, you made a story for you that you love, and everyone around you is telling you it's not good, and you don't care because you're making the story that you love.
That's what I'm afraid of, is what it is.
Those three things, and again, I will not even watch a second of, actually, I've watched several seconds. I've been watching them, the reviews on. But that's
if they genuinely made a story that they loved, though, I don't know. I might respect that more than just like shilling out and doing fan service.
So, I feel like there's a difference, though. There's a split between like something that's new and something that has a lot of established.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not always saying to go with that, but that may be where that starts to break down.
It comes off as insulting when you have a writer like Tolkien, that he has a set way of how his world is, and then somebody violates it.
Well, I think what's insulting about it isn't that it's a new story. It's that it's a new story that has already been written. Like they're changing what he already wrote.
Yeah, and violates other parts of the lore. It's not like it's a new story that doesn't actually contradict anything existing. That would be one thing. It is a new thing that deliberately contradicts things.
Yeah, like Galadriel, and bringing in new characters, and like, oh, well, this is what she did. It's like, actually, we have an entire book on that, so thank you.
Yeah, I had the same problem with the Harry Potter Cursed Child play.
Oh my god,
we know how the time turner works in Prisoner of Azkaban, and then the way that it works in Cursed Child is a completely different way of time travel. It's like it breaks the rules of the universe.
It breaks the rules of everything. That entire show.
I'll go against you on that, Dax, because I actually don't see a difference between these. First of all, when you're dealing with an existing IP and you're going to a new medium, you're always going to piss off fans because they don't understand how hard it is. I mean, I've translated some of my written stuff to, script form, and I've had to do different things because it's a different medium. I mean, basically, you take a 150,000 word novel and you're paring it down to about 20,000 words is what a movie script is. So now you get the help of the video, which does help you tell the story, but it still is. That's why, like, one of my sons was pissed off at the whole Percy Jackson thing because he was like, there's this one character and they cut these other two and they just gave the traits to that one character. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what you have to do sometimes because, those two other characters only added, X and Y, and that's not good enough to give them screen time. So let's just give X and Y to this, character that has much more in the story and let them do that. And so I know a lot of fans of the Percy Jackson series are pissed off of that. But the reason why I'm saying I go against you is because storytelling is storytelling. If you're going to play for the mass, I think one of the reasons why I've been so successful in the mass market is because I am the quintessential mass market consumer. I don't read literary fiction. I don't watch art house movies. I don't watch pretentious crap because I don't care. I don't want to waste my time with that. I want to be immersed in something that's very enjoyable, that has a great message, that at the end I walk away with some value that you gave me, not that I have to now figure out where my value is at because you left everything so ambiguous that I have no idea what you're really saying. And so you hope that I get there. And so I don't think it is selling out. I think what I always, in all my teachings, I say this, it's always about the reader. It's always about the reader. That is not selling out. I am a small business owner. They are my customers. I don't write anything I don't love. I don't write anything like there's so many things that I've written that in these last couple of years have become hardcore political messages. And it ticks me off that when this stuff starts coming out next year, people will be like, oh, you did that to check a box. No, I absolutely didn't. I did it because it was the best thing for the story. Like, I don't care about checking boxes. Yeah. And so I just tend to check boxes because I write very dynamic stories. But, like I said, I was with Fox for literally a half a day and went in and they were like, here's this laundry list of check boxes that this show is going to fit in. So how are you going to create these characters that are these check boxes? And I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm not, I'm gone. And I left because I'm not going to write something like that. It's horrible. But like, if you still pay attention to the reader, that's not a crime. Everything I write is always, how is this going to affect you? I know how it affects me. But like the reason why I have such a huge beta reading pool at the end of and Megan's now seen a couple of my chapters that have my beta reading questions at the end of it. I know what I think that I've done. So like one of the questions is, what on the first page hooked you? I know what line hooked me, but I need to see if it's going to hook you guys. And so I want them all to answer it. Just questions that I ask my beta team is always to verify, have I done my job as an artist? Because my job as an artist is to impact you, not me. I do impact me. I am my favorite author. I love everything I write. I am freaking amazing as far as I am concerned. Like if I could just read my stuff and never write it, I would just read me all day long. Unfortunately, I got to write it or I can't read it. So
It's this, yeah.
But I'm still, even though I love it, I will, if something doesn't work out, if I think it was going to go, if I thought this scene did what it was supposed to do, and I send it out to 50 epic fantasy fans, and really 15 of them are like, you did not do what you think you did. Well, that's going to put me below 4 or 5 stars. And so I'm going to be like, all right, I obviously failed. Let me look at this again. Let me come up with another way that makes me happy, but also solves the problem that they had. And I don't feel like that's selling out because at the end of the day, I'm going to come up with something that I love. I just feel like they're pushing me to just go that much further, just to do that much more for them. And again, it's why I have a 94% hook rate. Read me. You're probably going to read me for the rest of your life. Just the way it is.
Let me ask. Yeah, what the number? Yeah, numbers and money. Yeah, tell where things. Let's talk about the fan service that Dax brought up, because he was saying that well, somebody might make a whole new story. Is that better than fan service? And I don't know whether this idea of fan service is positive or negative. It's not a word I use all that much. But let's just say giving the fans what they want. And these are 3 movies that I have not seen personally, but I hear them talked about. Maybe you have all here. The new Spider-Man movie, the latest Ghostbusters movie, and then the Eternals, the Marvel Eternals.
Wait,
and
Ghostbusters as in the one after the women one, right?
Yes.
The one after the women.
Sorry, I didn't see past the
one
women,
after
so I
the
couldn't
women
remember.
Oh, I didn't know there was a new one.
Just clarifying.
I have not seen it.
Yeah, there was a new one that everybody, it seemed like as I'm scrolling by on YouTube, I'm seeing that everybody loved the latest Ghostbusters and everybody loved the latest Spider-Man. I haven't seen them. I have been following Spider-Man. I probably will watch this Ghostbusters. I just haven't gotten to it. And everybody hated the Eternals as I'm going by on YouTube. But yet I have other people who are like, well, the Ghostbusters and the Spider-Man, those were just something that played right to the fans. And it didn't make me think. But when I watched the Eternals, I really thought about stuff, and that was great. So that's what other people tell me. But on the other hand, I'm like, well, then the Spider-Man and the Ghostbusters must have been the one that's successful, because regardless of whether you're trying to send some great, theme that you're supposed to be thinking about and message that you've got, if you haven't actually given people what they want out of a Spider-Man movie, whatever that is, when you're making a Spider-Man movie, then you failed, right?
I think it's deeper than that, though. Why did Spider-Man become the most popular Marvel character in the history of Marvel? Because he was an amazingly well-written, amazingly humanized, amazingly approachable. Like, I was Spider-Man growing up. He literally was my father. I didn't have a father. Spider-Man was my father, because I was a teenager when that was, really popular back in the, late 70s, early 80s, when it really gained ground. Everything he was going through, I was going through. And so it's twofold. One, if you're going to go into an existing IP, you can't now make Peter Parker a jerk and have him, basically be Tony Stark and murder a bunch of people. Yes, you're right. That will piss off fans, which I feel like is what they did in all these other things that we were talking about that we were poo-pooing on. So you do have to kind of be true in that light. But the reality is there are a bunch of Spider-Man movies that I thought sucked. In other words, all of them until the MCU. Like the first of the 3 new ones, I can't remember which one it was.
Homecoming?
Yeah, is that the first? Yeah, I think that was the first one.
That was the
I was so giddy when I walked into the theater after seeing that movie, because that was, not only was it Spider-Man, it absolutely was. It was the first time they ever wrote Spider-Man. He was the first Spider-Man character, in my opinion. But it was also a great story. Now, the other Spider-Mans, some of them were actually really good stories, so I don't poo-poo them on that. The only one that really wasn't is when they had that one where they tried to do too much, where they had the Sandman and they had
Spider-Man 3.
Yeah. Right. That one wasn't a very good story. The other 2 were actually fine stories. They just didn't quite portray the character well enough. So that's one side of it. But the story was fine. I've watched them a couple of times. I have no problem with them.
Yeah.
But Homecoming did exactly what you should do if you're stepping into somebody else's IP. You stay true to what made that IP famous. I mean, what made Lord of the Rings famous? Why is it the #1 selling fantasy of all time? Just because it was published in 1954? No. Just because it was, 3 novels divided out? No. None of that is why. It's all about the characters and the writing and what attracted the readers and what moved the readers in that. You have to be loyal to that if you're stepping into somebody else's IP. But then if you tell a crappy story, even if you're loyal, you have failed. So you
I feel like if you're able to still kind of have that essence of it, and that's where I kind of break, like, I don't think you have to, like, I'm fine with you telling your own stories, but if I feel like it's completely diverting from the essence of what it was, it kills it for me. Like, I am all for new storytelling and characters. I mean, how big is fan fiction? But that kind of stuff does well when it still has that essence of the characters or the theme.
And these two that we just talked about are the perfect example of that. So in Wheel of Time, they are redoing a story that's already written, story that you have already read, you already know, you're already a fan of. And not only do they butcher that and completely throw out the canon and literally ruined everything that made that story attractable to the fan base, then they also wrote it horribly and screwed everything up and insultingly. So they failed on both those sides. But Ring of Powers is its own story. All they had to do was, well, I mean, they still would have to do both sides, but they didn't have to be loyal to everything that was Tolkien. They can make up new characters. They can be in different parts of Middle Earth. They can do all sorts of new things. They just can't do stuff like, I don't know, 2 ages before we meet Galadriel's husband, just say that he's not there or dead or whatever. It's like,
well, that's what I'm saying. You can't rewrite Galadriel if he's like she's already been written.
Right. So if you're going to choose that character, then you need to be loyal to that. Make up all your own. So I have no problem with them adding characters and all that. Now, everything was written, from what I've seen so far, everything was written horribly. Again, I'm not going to watch a single second of it. So if you want to say, well, how can you say this because you haven't even watched it? Because
say it.
Yeah, everybody who's seen it has already told me this. People that I trust immensely, and let them take the pain for me.
I want to touch on why Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man and the new Ghostbusters was such a hit with a lot of people. I actually don't think it's anything complicated. I don't think it has anything to do with the writing. I think it just has to do with the fact that people wanted a new Ghostbusters. There hadn't been like a Ghostbusters with the original cast since Ghostbusters 2 in the 80s. And people were hyped to hear that Tobey Maguire was coming back for the new Spider-Man. That was nostalgic for people. And so really, if you want to know like the key to like summer movie success these days, I think it's resurrect a franchise and bring back the geriatric actors that you want to reincorporate into it, and people, for the sake of nostalgia, will go and see it.
I won't lie, it's a draw.
Even if they don't like it, even if they don't like it, they will go see it just to see what happens.
It'll make me smile just to see them. I won't.
Yeah. It's like this good feeling. You get like
even if it's a bad story and I don't like it, I'll be like.
Well, I would challenge that we're talking about two different things here. Yeah. Success in finances and success in storytelling.
Critical acclaim is what you mean.
So, yes, you're right. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Hollywood has remade every movie from the 80s. Where I challenge you, sure, they might have made a bunch of money because they advertised well and they did everything that they were supposed to get people in the butts in the seats. But if everyone walks out of there going, I don't even know why they remade that. That was terrible. Sure, you got my money.
Yeah.
But you also got my
those people's money.
Right, but they're not. I was gonna say I don't think most people said that walking out of these two recent movies.
Oh no.
I saw. This is what I saw.
But that's where I'm going to challenge you.
Okay.
It's also because they were amazingly well written. I mean, again, I haven't seen the Ghostbusters one. It's been on my list since it came out. I just haven't had a chance to sit down and do it. But all three of the new Spider-Man movies were fantastically written, as well as catered to.
This is what I've experienced, because I have to be honest. I haven't seen these two movies either. I'm not a big superhero person as is. I only like Batman, and when it comes to Ghostbusters, I mean, I really like the first Ghostbuster, but I haven't even seen Ghostbusters 2. Like it's just anyway. I've heard back from people I trust who have seen these movies, and for the average moviegoer friends of mine, just like average everyday people, not film buffs, they came out of Spider-Man and Ghostbusters saying, "Oh, that was really good. It was so good to see these things again." They have like great references and moments to stuff that I loved. And then about a few months later, that movie comes up. I'll bring it up to them again, like, "Hey, do you still like it?" And they're like, "Well," that's what they hit me with. They hit me with, "Well, it has some problems. It's probably okay." I'll be honest. I had some premiere hype. On me, and that's why I talk so good about it.
Yeah. Well, but what is it?
that's going to draw a core group of people to the movie or the show in the beginning. It could be the actor, like you're talking about, that somebody, or somebody reprising a role, or obviously the IP. We got a new Lord of the Rings thing, we got a new Game of Thrones thing that's going to be there, and you may be able to get people in the door, because of that. In fact, probably will with some of these large franchises on the first go around. But if you don't actually satisfy those people, then you're not going to grow and you're not going to explode. Now, if you're a genius, you can market to both the geeks of a particular fan base as well as the general public at the same time. And arguably, that's what the Fellowship of the Ring did, what Peter Jackson did. Because I've heard people say, I wasn't a big fantasy fan, but boy, when I saw those trailers, everything was so well done. I was invested in the characters. Boy, all of a sudden, he brought together not only all the Tolkien fans who were going to be there, but also everybody else. But if you're not a genius and you can't do that from the get-go, then you've got to have your core fans who these are the people who are going to show up for your franchise at midnight, if people do midnight showings and things like that. But then if you don't satisfy them, you're not actually going to have a hit. You want people to leave that and go, wow, that was fantastic. And my friend, whoever it is, that person hasn't read the books, but man, I'm going to take them to the movie theater because I want them to experience whatever it is. And this is a good way for them to do it. Even if not the books, they'll be introduced through it to the movies. And then you just explode from there. And what you do have to do, because Drake was talking about that there will have to be changes to the source material when you're moving to something else. But you really have to manage those fan expectations. Like that's part of, I think, making sure those fans are going to show up. So, Tom Bombadil is not going to be in the Fellowship of the Ring. So, we can do some fan management. Like we had to cut Tom Bombadil. So,
get rid of him for a little while.
So be expecting that. And I think that's an important part too, especially with the internet and the back and forth, that if you've got this, you do have to convince that target audience that IP is in good hands. Because we talked about IP that's of cultural significance and things like that. So you really have to convince them in good hands.
I wonder on that, just because we have been on the Lord of the Rings stuff, the difference in between like Rings of Power and how I'm looking at it and how I'm just completely shut down with it versus The Hobbit, which I did not enjoy in the way that I felt like it diverted from the books and stuff, and I could go on 7 hours talking about it. But I would still recommend that to somebody as they start into that world. Like, is it my favorite? Did they do everything right? No. But I still feel like the essence is there enough to bring people into it. And I wouldn't have ever stopped somebody from going to see it if I thought, oh, maybe this will get them hooked. Versus I don't feel like Rings of Power is doing that. And I don't care to tell people to watch it.
To go and see it.
That's just an interesting in-between for me. Because, like I said, I was disappointed with The Hobbit. But there were so many good things, too. That it's a weird in between of those.
Well, and you're bridging exactly what we've been talking about here. They weren't as loyal as they could have been, because really that should have been one movie. So they had way too much fluff and way too much time to fill. So they weren't loyal to the fans, but they didn't do anything to outright insult the fans.
Yeah.
But it was still a good movie. It's still, we had a weird roller coaster fight scene thing that was a little campy, but
or a lot.
Yeah. So it's really hard to get streaming numbers from these companies. They do not like sharing information. But one thing that I'm going to try to get from the people that I know, I do want to see because the Wheel of Time did it. It just went down in viewership as it went on. The last one was nowhere even near. And I kind of want to see if that holds true. I mean, that really is your metrics. That's unique. So, like I said, they had 25 million a couple days ago. We watched pilot.
How many watched?
Yeah. Where are we going to be at an episode?
Well, and that's also, it made me think of it because of your shirt, but Doctor Who, I'm a giant Doctor Who fan, and I have still watched everything through because I believe there is some light at the end of the tunnel. But this past, the viewership has gone down so much because the writing messed up and they retconned stuff. and the characters didn't feel right. It didn't feel like Doctor Who, and I think that's a great example of somebody taking over and not doing well with it, not giving, I don't know.
And I don't understand. Chinball wrote every episode for the last 9 seasons before he took over the showrunner. The lowest rated show was written by him every season. And it's like, oh, he's always written the worst episode of every single season. He obviously needs to be in charge. Like, that's just going to make it all great. Like, Moffat is an amazing writer. And when he took over, it took a hit because Moffat isn't a great epic writer. He doesn't do this, really long story arcs as well. And so it definitely took a hit when he took over. But he's written some of the best. I mean, he wrote Blink. He wrote, some of absolute.
It's some of the best ones. The ones that I show, I've showed Brennan. Brennan didn't know Doctor Who really. And those are the ones I'm like, look, you don't have to watch the millions of seasons there are. I love them, but I'm not going to do that to you. But here are some episodes, and definitely Moffat. Those are the ones that grab you.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
But Russell T Davies is coming back, although I'm not happy with what I'm hearing.
I don't know. I just hope I have more hope that he can kind of get it back on track and then hand it off to somebody.
Yeah.
The viewership. I just watched the numbers go down, and I was like,
yeah. He's literally an amazing writer. He hooked me, like, this is going to be weird, but Queer as Folk had me every single time. I was absolutely there. My wife would walk by, and I'm down there watching TV, and there's graphic male on male stuff going on. And she's like, do you need to tell me anything? I'm like, yeah. Russell T Davies is an amazing writer. These are amazing characters.
The writing is,
Every week I watch that show because he was so... And I'm not into the whole other side of it. It doesn't do anything for me, but the characters. And then when he took over Doctor Who, it was like magic. Like, literally, you could not have gotten a better showrunner for the relaunch of Doctor Who. And like I said, I wasn't upset with Moffat. Great writer. Sure, the story took a little bit of a hit.
But Chibnall killed it.
Chinball is what I call him. I haven't watched it, and it's the same too, because first of all, I've thought they should have done a female Doctor Who for a long time, and the actress is a really good actress. She just had nothing to work.
She's so good, and that's why I was upset, because I thought the writing really good. She had so much potential there, and it just didn't happen. And I'm like, I need y'all to just forget about the last few seasons. And
I only watched half of the first one of two.
I watched it. I did that because I felt like because it changes so much that I want to keep supporting it, so that I hope that one day it'll get better. And that's one of the only things I will do that for. I will say that.
Again, I'm old, so they had already broken my heart with Sylvester McCoy back in, the original series, because I was growing up watching those as they were dropping. And in the 80s, when the Sylvester stuff was coming out, and he was a fine doctor, just the writing had just absolutely tanked.
Yeah.
And I stuck with it all the way to the end until it got canceled. And once Chinball took over, I did a half a season. I'm like, nope, I'm not going through this again.
I understand.
It already hurt me once. The scar's still there.
That's something I can hope can be resurrected with viewership.
Well, I have a lot of faith in Davis. He's an amazing storyteller.
Let's, based on how this conversation has gone, let's try to contrast what we were just talking about with some of these other franchises or other stories with something that we really like, that we talked about prior to getting started here, which was House of the Dragon. Because things that we don't like on YouTube in general gets a whole lot of negativity, and it's very easy to go down a hole of absolute hate. And I'm not saying it's not deserved in many cases, but I mean, you can go down endless amounts of, if you don't like something, you can watch hundreds of hours of it. But then what we like doesn't get talked about. So why don't we contrast what happened with the Rings of Power, and why specifically talk about why House of the Dragon has gotten it right and done it so well? Because I think on the very first episode that we did here, I had said I wasn't going to watch it because, like many people, I felt very bad about what had happened with the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones or 3 or however you count it. And of course, I wish I had books, but I had really been enjoying those books, and I wish I had more of them. And I did enjoy the first 5 seasons. And so I chose to kind of remember the joy and was like, hey, there was a lot of joy there. So because of that, I think I will give House of the Dragon a try. And I'm very glad I did, because when it started going, it started playing and I was going to do a little bit of work. I was like, I probably can watch, just watch it while I'm working. And I couldn't. Like, as soon as that happened, I heard the music and everything, and I just turned, and then I was in. And I put down the work and watched.
I was worried about that one definitely too, which I have not seen Game of Thrones. I can't talk on this at all, but I am glad that it seems to have hit better.
So I've only seen.
Wait, you saw House of the Dragon, but you didn't see Game of Thrones?
I haven't seen anything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I only saw the pilot of Game of Thrones. I own all of them because it was before streaming when they were really dropping. Streaming was kind of coming out, but I was buying them all on Blu-ray with the intent of watching them. But I've read the first 4 books completely. I have never gotten past page 60 on the 5th book. It is horrible. But I don't blame the writers for screwing up those last couple of seasons. So when you're writing this is the way I always explain it. When you're writing an epic fantasy trilogy or whatever saga, how many ever novels you do, you broaden and broaden and broaden and broaden, but at some point you curve, and then you come toward the end, tying up everything until you finally come to your conclusion. Jordan's never, George
R. Martin, yeah,
on any series, because he's written a ton of stuff, and he's never not curved. He always just writes like this, and he just keeps going and going, and then he stops writing it and just leaves all the fan base just there.
Make assumptions.
I promise you, had they not made a Game of Thrones TV show, you wouldn't even gotten any resolution, in my opinion. And that's obviously, there's no way to prove me right or wrong on that, but I don't think George would have ever finished, ever. And so having that many plot arcs and that many crazy stuff going on that was, because he also, I feel like he puts in stuff. He's like, oh, be cool plot line. This, I have no idea where it's going to go, but it's really cool. And he just writes it. And so I don't blame them so much. And again, I've only watched the first episode of the TV show. And then the big reason why I've never gone back to it is because after everybody started screaming about, you're right, 6, 7, 8, or 7 and 8. I'm like, well, I don't even want to waste my time on watching those now. The first 3 books are fantastic. The 4th one, really, really hard. And then in the first 60 pages of the 5th book, you're in a shack with a dude with a gut wound, and you never leave the shack, and no one ever comes into the shack. 60 pages of just this crappy. It's like, I just can't get past. 3 times now I've tried to start that book, and 3 times I failed.
I concur with that. Like I said, I've really enjoyed going through the books, but by the time they get on, as you go longer, that's the critique that you have to have. There's so much there that does not advance and keep things moving.
So with House of Dragons, they really had the opportunity to do exactly what Ring of Power did. Both of them are the exact same. We have an existing IP. We're going back in time. We just have to make the world feel like it did. We have to, there is some canon that we have to pay attention to. As long as we hit those, and as long as we create, amazing characters and tell compelling stories and everything like that, which is what they've done. A little slow, but I'm fine with slow. I mean, epic fantasy slow, so I love slow. My wife doesn't necessarily love slow, so she's not totally enjoying House of Dragons, but I'm good with it. Take as long as you want to develop this stuff. As long as you're developing, as long as I feel like we're moving forward, and there's a lot of really great dialogue and a lot of really great character interactions. Matt Smith, nice seeing him again. So yeah, I mean, literally, House of Dragons is a perfect example of what Ring of Power should have, could have, would have been if it had anyone that was not trying to push a political agenda
or competent. I don't even know if they were. I don't know the people who are on there, but I don't think they were.
No, I mean, this is the first thing they've ever really done. So to be given something like this, and I'm not saying that can't happen. The Wachowskis, when they wrote The Matrix, when Joel Silver took them to Warner Brothers. They hadn't done nothing. And he was like, yeah, $80 million. And they were like, yeah, no. But they already had a movie. It was a little $3 million lesbian love story that already was cast. It was already greenlit. It already had everything but a director. The director had just bailed on it. And so they were like, hey, go make that movie for us. And if you do that well, and I love that movie. It was a great movie. And they were like, all right, you can do it. You've proven yourself. Here's $80 million. Go make The Matrix. And so they at least proved that they had the ability to do this stuff. And I don't feel like the showrunners of Ring of Power,
they have proved they can do anything.
Well, and that's a huge error at the high level, because, my argument was that if you set it in a different world, and I had recommended Forgotten Realms, but if you could have had less experienced people and just said, listen, we're going to take and do it for less money, and then say, we're going to grow it. We do have faith to grow it so that by time you get to season 2, then it's picking up speed, it's attracting people. But if you're going to come out with, this is the Lord of the Rings franchise, most expensive TV show ever or whatever, blah, blah, man, you'd better have the people there who can just make sure it is fantastic from the first second.
And I always go against this, because it's always, my best moment in any movie was the beginning of Deadpool, when it said written by, what did it say? The true heroes. Because writers are basically the redheaded stepchildren of the movie and TV industry. Everything starts with writing, in my opinion. So look at there were several Netflix fantasy things that came out that were horribly written. They gave them to people that had no experience and didn't really have any writing chops. They lasted a season, they're gone, because the viewership was just tanked. So I disagree with you. You can't just give. It still comes down to the writing. I'm not saying you can't be a first timer and do well. You can absolutely do that, but you've got to do well.
You got to have the writing.
Well, you've got to do well. Oh, yeah, you've got to do well. But
if you had this group of writers and showrunners trying to push this political agenda, and you gave them a generic fantasy and less budget, but enough budget to make a good-looking show, it would still tank, in my opinion, because they would still be a horrible propaganda piece that, especially after 4 or 5 years of this stuff now, the mass market is just done. They don't want it. The crazy thing is, when I can't remember which one it was. It might have been the first Spider-Man, but one of the Spider-Mans came out, one of the new ones from the MCU, and in the title of almost every single review was, and there's no political agenda. Like they're actually were excited that there was no political message. That's bad. If your entire mass market is excited about the fact that your movie just doesn't have a political agenda, then you're probably doing too many political agenda stuffs, because people are tired of it. And so
I think it's also the fact that you would associate a political agenda movie with a movie that I don't know, I don't typically associate that with pop culture. I associate that with dramas. I associate that with thrillers. I don't know, typically when people go to the summer popcorn movie, they do it for pure escapism.
Yeah, so, escapism is the word I would. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that.
And that's why, and the worst thing is, to me, I feel like they've only gone off everything I love. Every IP that's a geek IP, they've
universally targeted.
Because geek sells. They wouldn't do it if it didn't sell, I guess.
But again, it only sells. That's only financial success, and only in the beginning. I've got tons
if you're the studio, you only care about financial success.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got tons of people that have canceled Disney that are not going to go to the Disney movies anymore. As far as
this is why I'm not watching Rings of Power. I would love to give it my own review, but I don't want to review it if watching it gives them money. So,
right.
Yeah.
So that's why I said, when I said to my movie, that movie producer I was talking to yesterday, I was like, yeah, I give them 2 to 4 more years, and then this agenda stuff is going to be gone, because it's literally losing them money.
Oh, wow. So you're in the industry, so to hear that from you, that's very promising.
So I'm on the edge of movie and TV industry. I'm right there at the door. I got to maybe my foot's in the door. or a toe is there. I get to see inside a little bit, but I'm definitely a novelist, so I don't want to.
It sounds hard to believe that there's a light at the end of the tunnel on that type of stuff. It sounds like we're a long way from that, from my perspective.
Edgar Allan
But
Poe,
I'm not in the industry really at all beyond some PA and acting stuff.
Edgar Allan Poe wrote a beautiful poem about a pendulum, and it was an allegory for us. And right now, the pendulum has swung hardcore to pendulum always swings back. And so
history repeats itself, in other words. But,
well, not necessarily repeats itself, but yeah, you're right on that. But I'm just saying right now, everybody's on board with this whole thing.
Yeah.
And when they start losing money and pissing off fans and nobody's watching their stuff, because this stuff is expensive. This isn't cheap stuff.
Yeah, like they're bragging right now that Rings of Power is the most expensive TV show ever made, and I'm just looking at that like, okay, well, you're bragging about how much money you're going to lose.
Also, a really interesting article I read either last night or this morning that basically said Amazon is literally going to determine the future of their studio. The
I saw that.
I read that. I saw that.
Yeah.
On Rings of Power. And so I'm like, oh, so I don't need to pitch anything to Amazon Video anymore, is what you're saying, because they're not going to be around next year. Because if that's what they're saying, this is I think this is going to be a huge flop. Because the interesting thing to me about it is there's no 2, 3, or 4-star reviews for the most part. I mean, you'll find the occasional one, but pretty much it's 1 star, 5 star.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and the 5-star are people that never read the book. Their 5-star is always the word pretty or gorgeous is always the main topic of their review.
I think most importantly, they're not fans, right? Like if you're giving the movie a 5-star review or the show a 5-star review, you're probably, a critic that just wanted something. I don't really know what you wanted. I don't know what they wanted.
What the big deal is, maybe.
Yeah,
I think, and unfortunately, like I said, I'm not into politics, so I'm not on any side of this whole war that's going on here in America. But I think the way it looks to me is the 1-stars are fans that are actually giving it critiques. Maybe there's some that are politically motivated or whatever. But the reviews that I've read, and I've probably read 50 of them now on the 5-stars, it feels like the Rings of Power has become a political war ground, and so you're jumping on your side and giving it a 5-star, and you don't even care. Maybe watch the show, but it's just so into political battle.
That reminds me, actually. There's been movies I watched where I agreed with the political message of it, but I was just an honest critic about it, and I didn't like the movie. I'm gonna say it. I didn't like Don't Look Up. Don't Look Up wasn't funny to me.
Oh my god, it was terrible.
It was nominated for Best Picture. Are you joking? Like, I have seen so many funnier comedies than that movie, even from the same year. I was like, and look, if you like the movie, not knocking you. I'm just saying this was a movie where I get the impression that a lot of the praise that came out of it, and especially going far enough to nominate it Best Picture, it feels like that was something they felt a moral need to do. I felt like people were saying, well, we agree climate change is a problem, so we've got to push this movie as much as we can. And it's like, guys, I agree climate change is real. Let's solve climate change, but this movie's bad.
Yeah. And so some of this praise, in my opinion, is just coming from that. It's coming from the political fight, which to me is stupid. All I care about is stories. I don't care about your political.
Well, even if you care about the political fight, it's like, don't try to have the political fight through every means of media. Like, just don't. I mean, the fight is not going to be one.
Just let me get my Doctor Who.
You're not going to resolve these issues through movies. You can talk about them through movies, but you won't resolve them through movies. So don't put all your heart and mind into it.
Well, and that's the thing. Like I said, every story has a message. Like, I have a transgender character in one of my series. I've got a furry in one of my stories. I've got one of my romances in the Big 20 thing, the 20 novel thing that we're working on that's going to drop in 24. The main romance is between 2 guys. but I'm not
Okay,
doing.
well, I appreciate you for bringing some nuance to the table here, then, because I feel like people feel like they have to choose between, okay, I either have to side with my politics and promote all of these movies that side with my politics, or I let the other side take over.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
So as an example, because one of my writers is on one side, because there's 4 of us writing it. It's my story. I'm plotting everything out, but I can't write 20 novels and put them out in 5 years. He didn't really appreciate this. And I'm like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work any other way. It doesn't work between 2 women. It doesn't work between a guy and a girl. It literally does not work unless it's 2 guys. It doesn't. So I don't care about anything else but that. That's all I care about. How do I deliver that message to the audience? And are there, his point was, well, there is going to be people that they're not going to like this. They're going to be, that are, I'm like, okay, that's their problem. That's not my problem. It's an amazing story. It's an amazing, heartwarming, tragic, because it's a tragic love story too. And it's so humanizing, and it moves me so deeply. And so far, the beta readers all feel the same way that, and even him, like, it was a very short little teeny argument. It wasn't even really an argument. He was just saying, hey, we might be alienating some readers if we do this. But once I went through what I had plotted and where this, how it's going to end and everything like that, he's like, oh yeah, that's pretty powerful. Yeah, you're right. We gotta do that. I don't care. I'm not trying to write gay characters. That's actually, I get asked that a lot at a lot of conventions. How do you write a character that you're not? How do you write a gay character if you're not gay? How do you write a black character if you're not black? It's a very simple answer. You don't write them. You write great characters that are fully rounded and deep and human, who happen to be whatever. They happen to be black or white or gay or straight or whatever. And you can pull things from their culture, their race, their society, whatever. But you still, if you set out to write something that you're not, you're going to write a crappy stereotype of that thing.
Oh yeah, like that Stonewall movie from Roland Emmerich. Did you see that?
No.
Okay, it's just the gay community hates it. It's like it just. I mean, it's what you're talking about.
I just mentioned Queer as Folk.
Yeah,
I loved that freaking TV show. Like, it was fantastic in every way. I'm not gay.
Yeah.
All I cared about was they were dynamic, amazing, realistic. Like, they felt like they're really humans. I feel like I'm looking in to this world, these people's lives and their relationships and their hardships and their joys and successes and failures. And that's how you do. Now, Russell T. Davies is gay, so he is a gay writer writing the gay community.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, do you think you could write a story like Queer as Folk that is so centered in queer communities?
I'm gonna get flack for this, but yes, I think I could. Now, would I have to do research? Would I have to could I do it from my little office without asking anything and going anywhere and doing anything? No, I could not. However, it's one of the reasons why I like writing fantasy. Like, in the first Genesis saga, there's a huge story arc on slavery. And no one has ever called me on that. Like, you're a white boy. How do you know? It's a lion dude. Are you a lion dude? What do you know about lion dude slavery? Like, nobody knows anything about lion dude slavery. So, I can play with, because everybody can understand the hardships and tragedies and just the inhumanity of being owned as property. Everyone can go down that path. You don't have to be a parent to understand how hard it would be to bury a child. You don't have to have ever had a child to do that.
Yeah.
Like, so
I think I can agree. Like, in terms of the research, if you really, really did your research, like, I've seen preparation for certain movies. Pixar is really good about this. If Pixar wants to do a movie that like takes place in Italy, they will send people out to Italy, rural areas of Italy, like even the rural parts, and just sort of film, interview, collect data. And then they end up making a movie that takes place in that feels very authentic. It doesn't feel insulting or like they weren't aware.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess with research, it could be possible. Yeah.
And I don't write any of that stuff. Everything I write. So even if somebody wants to pop me on this, I'm like, well, they're 2 elves. What do you know about elven homosexuality?
Yeah.
Because maybe my elf homosexuality is different than real.
Maybe the culture of that is different.
You don't know anything. You're stepping into my world. My world's fake. I can do whatever I want. Now, again, I don't want to offend anybody or alienate anybody. So I have gay beta readers. I have female beta readers. I have all different race beta readers. And I do that for a reason. There's a reason why I have a pool of 50 beta readers, and they have been collected over the last 15 years. And it's a wide variety because I want that feedback. I want different opinions than my own. But yes, I do think that I could write Queer as Folk. I mean, I don't write anything in the real world, so it would already be tough for me to do that. But yes, any good writer can write anything because, you know, a lot of people think imagination is the number one thing writers need. And I don't think, maybe second or maybe third. The number one thing a writer needs is empathy. You need to be able to become writing. And if you can do that, you can write anything.
The first story I ever wrote, it was a short story, but it was about a girl and her sister. And it's kind of weird to think that like my first story was written from a female perspective, but I really tried hard to like capture that to the best of my, I don't know whether I did that well or not. It's just, I really do like how writing is an opportunity for somebody to get in someone else's shoes.
All right. Well, I think we should end on that note. But we should also say, go watch House of Dragon then. That's the one we want to support then. And you don't have to have watched Game of Thrones to enjoy House of Dragon. You can just step right in and watch House of Dragon. And episode 3 is tonight. So, all right. Will everybody go around, let everybody know if you got a current project or where to find you and things like that. And we'll just go Drake, Megan, Brennan, Dax, and then we will be out of here.
So Max Alexander Drake. I go by Drake. Like I said, pretty much if you want to keep up with me, starvingwriterstudio.com, all singular, Starving Writer Studio. Join my mailing list. I've got a 5-novel fantasy saga dropping in June. I've got a 20-novel that's going to start dropping in 24. Once it starts dropping, the 5 novels just one a year, but once the 20 novel starts dropping, it's one every 3 months for 5 years. So every 3 months, a brand new 150, 160,000 word novel. And I may have a season 1 of a cartoon out next year. We'll just that's
very cool.
So we'll see what happens with that.
All right, Megan.
Hello, Megan. I'm going to be in a theater show, theater production, whatever you call it, upcoming at the end of October. Other than that, just kind of chugging along with little things. You can find me on Megan Peko on Instagram, though, if you want to keep up.
All right.
All right. I'm Brennan Martinoni. You can find me on Instagram at Brennan Martinoni or on my website, brennanmartinoni.com. Link should be in the description because good luck spelling that. I've working on a post-production coloring for a couple projects right now, developing scripts, making commercials every week, but hopefully something new of my own will be out sometime next year.
All right.
Yeah, my project is in development right now. So in the meantime, if you just want to see more of me, keep watching this channel, keep watching The Cultist, General Geekdom. Enjoy it.
And yes, please do like, subscribe. October 7th, I believe, is going to be the date that The Cultist Season 2, Episode 1 drops. So I'm going to be putting out a lot of material here over the next month in advance of that. I got a lot of behind-the-scenes footage and or interviews and things like that for The Cultist. They're going to be coming out over the next month, as well as a whole bunch of other videos, some of them clips from different conversations that we've had, and then also new stuff that I'm putting out as well. So I'm planning on putting out at least 1 video a day, maybe 2 videos a day in the lead up between here and October 7th for the drop of the first episode of Season 2 for The Cultist. So hang out with us here. All right, everybody. Thank you. See you later.
Yeah.